I definitely I took it personally. At the same time, the fans were feeling a similar thing, which is an interesting journey that I went on with them, because they would often come up in those years after and at conventions that I did and say, no, it's not popular to like your movie, but I like it. I fight with my friends that it's the best Superman movie. But everybody had to kind of like be cagey in their support of Superman Returns, because they thought the world didn't like it, but they did. So then if we'll get to my eventual return, like went on a journey with me of like upset that it wasn't getting respected to know, we're back. They're validated and I was validated.
I'm Cole Haddon, and welcome back to 5 a.m. Story Talk, where we try to make sense of the 21st century together, all through the lens of storytelling and art. 20 years ago, two friends and I caught an afternoon screening of Superman Returns at the Grove in Los Angeles. When we left the theater, we were fiercely divided about how much we loved or hated it, and determined to get to the bottom of our disagreements, headed to a nearby diner to hash our reactions out. All these years later, audiences remain similarly divided, though I do think the tide has officially and rightly begun to turn against the haters. Today, I hope to contribute to that reconsideration with the help of Superman himself, or rather, Brandon Routh, who played the Man of Steel in Superman Returns. We're going to get into everything, from how he manifested getting cast as Superman, to the making of the film and the public's reaction to it, to his struggles with depression and coming to terms with the character's role in his life after Warner Brothers decided not to produce a sequel. You don't have to love Superman Returns to get anything from this conversation either. Start to finish, it's just a great story in 3 acts about a guy who was told to believe he could fly, who was grounded by forces beyond his control, and who found his way back to believing through fans and an unexpected second chance to play the character 13 years later as part of the CW's Arrowverse crossover event, Crisis on Infinite Earths. Now, as for the film itself, I've never understood why Superman Returns isn't more appreciated. Though to be clear, it's always had a very passionate fan base. It's a continuation of the Richard Donner, Christopher Reeve films that features numerous amazing action sequences, including one I'd argue is amongst the best ever put on film. It's packed with heroic moments, shots so iconic they could be framed, and a ton of heart. It's also the most brutal take on Lex Luthor put on film. I mean, the ex-con shivs Superman in the back with a piece of kryptonite and Prison Yard stomps him. Brandon has some thoughts on why Superman Returns didn't resonate with everyone, but one of my least favorite complaints is the fact that the film involves Superman having a kid with Lois Lane, except in the year since, Superman having kids has become absolutely normal across mediums. For example, on the TV series Superman and Lois, he had multiple kids. In comics, I can't even tell you how many offspring there are now. This is an example of why I think Superman Returns deserves serious reconsideration. When you look back at it today, its flaws often seem silly in hindsight. It's just an operatic and often poetic take on the character, just like the first 2 Donner films. More interested in treating Superman as a vision of what we can be, rather than a god to be deconstructed by a cynical culture. It's worth noting that even though we don't get into the subject during our chat, I suspect Brandon was as excited as I was to talk about and celebrate Superman Returns with me, if only because retrospectives about it on its 20th anniversary aren't exactly easy, since 2 of its key players have been repeatedly accused of sex crimes in the years since the film's release. I'm going to avoid commenting on any of that, except to say it makes large-scale look-backs at Superman Returns pretty damn hard. There were no similar retrospectives for The Usual Suspects' 30th anniversary last year either, which both men were involved with too. It's something we don't think about enough, how the alleged actions of individuals can derail the work, careers, and passions of hundreds of other people involved in making art. Before I dig in, you should know that Superman Returns was written by Michael Dougherty and Dan Harris with a story by Bryan Singer, Dougherty, and Harris. Singer directed. It also starred Kate Bosworth as Lois Lane, James Marsden as her new man and alleged baby daddy, and Kevin Spacey as Lex Luthor. Parker Posey deserves a special shout-out for just being brilliant as she always is, and hilarious start to finish as Luthor's right hand. If you enjoy my conversation with Brandon, be sure to subscribe to 5 a.m. Story Talk here or at Substack so more conversations like it keep showing up in your life. Brandon will also return for a bonus episode to discuss a seminal piece of art from his life, which he'll name for you at the end of this first part of our conversation. But you won't want to miss this one, I think, especially if you grew up in the 80s, like us. All right, let's do this. Let me introduce you to actor and Superman, Brandon Routh.
Welcome, Brandon. It's so great to meet you. How are you doing today?
I'm great. It's great to meet you as well, Cole. Happy to be here. I'm doing well. It's later here in Los Angeles, so.
The day's just starting here, a bit gray, but excited to do this. As I was just saying, I'm a big fan of Superman Returns, and I'm excited to talk about it on its 20th anniversary. It's a film I love very much, and I think deserves a lot more love.
I agree.
Well, so to prep, what I did was research the film rather than you, so I can find out about it through you and find out about you through this conversation. But something I did manage to come across was the fact that you auditioned for Smallville, a few years before this as well. Is that true?
Yes, yeah. So that would have been 2000, I think, and 2001, like around the fall and winter and up to that time. Yeah, and I got a call back, and I thought, this is the thing, because my first manager had kind of set the Superman. Put Superman in my sights when he mentioned that I looked a lot like Christopher Reeve. I'm a big fan of him. If there's ever a TV show or movie, I'm definitely going to get you in on that. And from that moment on, back in 1999, it was like a small part of a possibility, the smallest, right? But it grew and grew and grew. And so then when Smallville came around, I was like, oh, this is it. And then when it didn't happen, I was like, oh, no, they were wrong. Or I was wrong, or stupid me believing in dreams. But no, then Tom got it, and that was great. And now I'm friends with him.
Were you a fan of Superman as a kid? What did he mean as much to you as other characters?
I don't. To be most honest, I did not have. I love Superman. I love Superman the movie, and Tell a Story, which is a real story about being so excited to see it the first time when I was, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 it was on TV, and then my Superman pajamas that I made myself sick with a migraine headache, and half the movie I spent, lying down on the couch, ready to puke into a bowl. And then superheroes, because they weren't around everywhere, and I didn't have friends or family that collected comic books, they weren't in my experience in a daily basis. It was sports, friends, going through the woods, playing Nintendo. Then I got into my geekdom, started to go into fantasy through things like Dragon Warrior, the old NES game, and then Shining Force, which are a couple role-playing games that came out for the Sega Genesis, and then books like Terry Brooks and some other fantasy novelists. And so that's where my entry into heroes and stuff came from, more of a mythical background with Superman and Batman and those guys existing in the movies and things I saw. But it wasn't, they were a frame of reference, but not heavy in my experience, other than when I, watching the films.
How did you get to LA then? I'm always curious about that leap and the general journey and fear that comes with those early years.
I was going to the University of Iowa as an English major. I was a freshman and loved college. I didn't have a lot of friends at all growing up in high school. In early as a kid I did, but then middle school, halfway through middle school, my friends started going separate ways and I was pretty lonely. So going to college, I loved college. It was a hard thing to leave. But then I did performance and music in high school. My parents are both musicians as well as many other jobs, but my dad's a drummer, jazz drummer, my mom's a singer. And so a lot of performance, but to do it professionally in Los Angeles was never an idea or a thought to me until I went to college. And at college, I was more popular than I was in high school, and girls were saying, "Oh, you could be a model," and I was like, "What?" But then I started looking into it because I thought I could make some money as a poor college student. That'd be nice in Iowa to just to be in a Yonkers or JCPenney's ad. And that little meeting in Des Moines, Iowa, took me to IMTA in New York, which is kind of a bigger showcase, and where I met my first manager. And they said, "Why don't you come out to Los Angeles, give it a shot for 3 months?" Which I was really wary about dropping out of college because I loved school. And, but I did. And I stayed with my great aunt and uncle in Downey, California, about 45 minutes outside of Los Angeles proper, and drove in. But my first manager, they hooked me up with an acting coach who I was able to work with before each audition. And then I took acting class from Dennis Laval, my acting coach at the time. And, just kind of learned. And because it was a 3-month trial, I think that made it maybe easier. I already had a back out. Like I wasn't going there to do it or bust, Hollywood or bust. I had a backup and I was well supported by my representation, and I was in the right place, right time. Who knows? All the metaphysical stuff you can throw out to intentional, unintentional, on my path or whatever, doors opened up. I said yes to opportunities, and I think other than a couple stumbling blocks, I was very well supported in my experience in many ways. So it wasn't it was never a thought of if I failed so much in the beginning. It was, I'm not sure I want to go and do, and what is this life? This new life.
I've had a few friends who didn't intend to become actors, and how it happened to them, and they ended up with a much better mental health relationship, I guess, with it, especially during that early stretch. For me, I wanted to be a screenwriter since I was 12. Failing wasn't really an option. It was my whole identity was going to be a failure in that case. There's still pressure, but maybe you threaded the needle in a more positive way.
Yeah, I think I was also not dumb, but naive enough and ignorant enough to not know the difference. I mean, that honestly has a great deal to do with my success, I think, and my continuing on through challenging times at times. Challenging times even after you make it. There are challenging times after you make it. People think you make it. Their challenges persist. But early on, definitely not even knowing how hard it could be made it easier to succeed because I didn't see I didn't think of as many obstacles. And so my path was more clear. I dreamed bigger, more open dream, honestly. The more I get to this space now and understand how my thoughts can, where I'm positioning my thoughts are creating my future, I can see how being in the heartland in Iowa and in a lovely place that I grew up in allowed me to dream big and create that possibility for myself.
So I'm sure you've told this story a million times in various forms, but I want to hear it and interrogate it myself. It's 2005, I assume. Your manager was the first person to tell you that Superman was happening again, or did you hear about it some other way?
Oh, it was much earlier than that, actually. In 2003, I went to October of 2003. I went to a karaoke birthday party, and there was a young lady there who I was conversing with, friend of a friend, who somehow we got on the topic of what she was working on, Superman, and her boss, her writer that she was working for, she was his assistant, I believe, at the time, was writing the Superman movie. And I didn't. Okay, well, that's wait, what Superman? I thought the movie that they were doing. This is me speaking. I thought the movie that they're doing is with Nick Cage, and because I'd seen him on Leno talking about it, and then I was like, well, Smallville, and then Nick Cage is going to be Superman, so that's not. There goes that for me. But she said no. they're moving on to a different version. It's a younger Superman. And she brought up, I guess, because I was reminding her of Clark or something. And so she said, maybe if you give me your headshot, I'll give it to my boss and maybe it'll get to the producers. So I was like, okay. Because I kind of told her the story then about my manager and my kind of connection with Superman, loose connection. And that was funny that she brought it up because as I had a little more backstory, I'd started working at Lucky Strike bowling alley lounge as a bartender. And it was there. And then a couple other places, once I moved out to Los Angeles, there had been more than one person who had then remarked about my resemblance to Chris. And so it was kind of become a running thing for me a little bit. So when she mentioned it again, I was like, wow, this is another sign. And me coming from Iowa, I collected a lot of signs, and I saw a lot of connection and many possibly serendipitous moments in life. I helped add to my belief that this was something that was a possibility for me. So I ended up driving over to Disney offices and parked my car and walked into the Lost offices, happened to be the Lost offices, to deliver this headshot to her. And lo and behold, she was working with J.J. Abrams at the time. And
wow, yeah.
So that was that, and kind of nothing, I don't know that anything ever came with that, that headshot ever got anywhere necessarily. But then about a month later, I would end up meeting Courtney Ford, who is now my former wife, but became my girlfriend at the time in November, and her brother, Bob Orsi, was writing partners with JJ at the time on Lost. And so I thought, a month later when I met her, I was like, this is weird and strange. Of course, I don't think I even knew that yet. I didn't know that it was months into dating that I knew that he was a writer and all that business, but just an odd connection in and of itself. And so then in February of 2004, there was a television pilot being cast for the CW. It was called The Mountain. And Stephanie Savage and Mick G were producing it. And Mick G was the director who was going to be the director of this new Superman movie at the time. So I saw that the paper come through the fax machine, and I saw his name on there. And I thought, if I go and have a good audition for this, maybe he'll be in the callback, and I'll see him, and he'll be like, you should come in and meet about Superman. Mm-hmm. So I went in and had this audition. It was for the bad guy, the edgy guy, of which I always never get that role. Especially then, because I had no edge. I have very little edge now, but I was not good at being edgy, the cool guy. But I got a callback. Mm-hmm. And so I went to the callback, and Mick G wasn't there, but Stephanie Savage was his producing partner. So I did the scene, and I was talking to Stephanie, and she happened to have gone to the University of Iowa for some time, did some ice skating. I think we talked about ice skating, and I can't remember what else, but we got done with that meeting, and I got a call again to go in for a third time. And I went in a third time and read for this other role. They really liked me, and they wanted me to put me in the show, but they couldn't figure out, what to cast me at. So they had me come back in, and I read for the role. And then a couple of days later, my manager called and said, as I was driving, and said, "I got good news and bad news. What do you want? Which first?" And I said, "Well, the bad news." So the bad news is that you are not getting the role in The Mountain. They didn't see that it was going to work. And I was like, oh man, because I was really I needed some money. I needed to work. And then I said, okay, so what's the good news? He said, you might want to pull over. And I said, no, what's the good news? He said, well, after meeting with you, they basically sent word to Mick G that they think that he should meet with you to come in about Superman. So the literal thing that I thought I made happen happen.
That's crazy.
I've told the story, and sometimes when I tell it, it doesn't seem as crazy as it is, but listen, there are so many things that are odd about the story in a good ways. So I had the meeting with Mick G. About 20 minutes. We didn't talk about Superman at all. In fact, I remember talking about him and surfing, and he was a surfer, and I don't surf, but I'm a swimmer, and I don't know what else. I tried to be as, Clark and Superman-like in that meeting as possible to represent the character. And I think that was the first time I met John Peters, who was one of the producers. And then I left. The funny thing before that meeting, I have to go back up. The night before that meeting, I was working at Lucky Strike, and I worked late. And I'd been going to the gym because I only found out about this meeting like 2 weeks before it was going to happen. So I was in the gym just trying to get as big as I could. And it was about 3 a.m. and I walked into the 24-hour gym in my apartment. Nobody was in there, but the TV was on. So I walk in and I go to the pull-up bar and I'm going to do some pull-ups, and I start to pay attention to what's happening on the TV. And it's Saturday Night Live. It's a rerun of Saturday Night Live. And the announcer says, "Live from New York at Saturday Night Live with guest host Christopher Reeve." And Chris hops out in his one and only performance on SNL in a pink bunny suit. And I was flabbergasted. I looked around. There was nobody around to watch me see this, that on the little night before I'm going to have my first meeting about this, of all the channels that could have been on and all of the reruns that could have been on, that I just happened to 3 a.m. come into the gym right at that moment was just like, oh. And so anyway, I was feeling pretty good about the meeting going in. I'll give you one more, because this is the most important one, probably.
Yeah.
When I was young, and I've told this story before, so if people have heard these, some people who've listened to some of my interviews have heard these before. But when I was young, I don't know what age, I have a memory of this dream, and I was flying as a kid. I was still a kid in the dream, above a metropolitan city, and I had a red cape on. Well, actually, I don't know if I had a cape on, but I was flying, and around me were koala bears with red capes. Now, that is odd because the movie was filmed in Australia.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you fix that math or solve that, but that is something that happened. So when Superman kept coming up in my life, I was like, I kept building this, like, what is this? Collecting these oddities of experiences, and each one, without deluding myself, trying not to as a young person, but going, this is so odd, but it feels like that means something that's positive. So I took that with me as part of why I felt so comfortable to take on the role. In some ways, is because I felt like I was actively going on the journey to be this character for longer, even going back to my youth. And my mom thought I was going to be she thought maybe I was going to be a pastor someday, because I grew up in Methodist, and I would always read this little booklet that they had, these tiny books that was called The Upper Room or something, and had prayers and stories in it. And I was a fairly good churchgoer and rule follower and all that, but I also was a big thinker, even though I didn't know it as a kid. And in some ways was training for that. There's a certain piousness and obviously religiosity or Christ-like equality to Superman that I connect with in that way because of that part of my upbringing also.
I'm curious, as an emotional experience, how confusing that was to essentially manifest something. And I mean, it feels like destiny, and to then have to process that, because we're obviously going to talk about a bit later the fact that the film didn't produce the franchise that you would have wanted. So you go from destiny to destiny, sort of. How does it? But that initial feeling and calling your parents also and saying, "I'm Superman." What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, that was some of the most incredible moments. To finally get the call. Then a year or so after that first experience that I was mentioning. Well, actually 6 months after my first meeting with McG, because they went through various production changes. 6 or 7 months later, to finally call my parents and say, "Do you know who you're speaking to?"
Yeah.
And then my uncle, "What?" no, that was incredibly exciting. All the possibility, the journey, just the fact that this little kid from Iowa had come out to Los Angeles and done that. Like, and I don't think it's hard to unpack those moments because I didn't have the worldview experience necessarily, or time or space or maturity or whatever, wisdom to unpack that. And to be honest, talking about it now, I feel like maybe I need to go back and have a meditation, kind of about that experience and just put myself back in that of that time a little bit to feel what it was, to feel again what it was like, and not just go from, okay, now what do I do, but honor that it happened,
I'm curious also, you get this amazing news. When do you see the script? And when do you realize the Superman essentially that you're going to play?
Well, I read,
and how does that feel? What you see on the page versus it's very different than Smallville and whatnot. And going back to read
the original script that I read was the J.J. Abrams script, and I went through that process and screen tested. We don't need to talk about it, but just to fill in briefly that bit. And then nobody got the role, and that was devastating because I thought this was, given all that information I gave you, plus there's some other things I didn't even mention, but those are the highlights. I was like, this is mine. And then when it didn't happen, I was pretty distraught, and I obviously made it, but it was a challenging time, a month and a half. Then they started casting again, and Brian came on, and then they were still casting, and then finally brought me in to have a meeting. And at that point, I auditioned for that without a script. It wasn't until, I actually don't remember when I read Superman Returns for the first time right now. That's a bit of a blur. But I must have been in the production office, and I don't know if it was before I got the role or after I got the role. We did audition scenes. I did read with Lois Lane's using the script, so I must have been. Well, I was cast before then anyway. That's why. But anyway, I'm happy for the script that I got. The Superman Returns is the Superman that fits me best at the time. I think I don't know if I would have been cast. I don't think I was the top choice. I was second, I think, or third. Who knows? For the McG version. We'll never know for sure, but unless they say. That was a different, it was still Superman, but it was a younger Superman. It was, I don't know that I would have excelled as much. There was something about Chris and the boyishness, the inquisitiveness, but the power that he maintained that I really felt attuned to in some way. And I just it wasn't, it was always there. It's like it was, I don't know how, but he and I are alike enough in something about our energy or our souls or our genetics, who knows what is, or upbringing, that there's enough crossover that I just really could tap into part of the essence of what he brought to the character. So I was happy when I read that script. I was like, oh, this is pretty epic. And this is, and such reverence to Superman in the past. I can see how we're going to bring people from the past into the future by not disregarding what has come before, but really honoring it. And maybe people will say, maybe we honored it too much. Maybe it needed to be, I don't know. But I'm grateful anyway for the present, for what I got to bring.
Well, I enjoy that reverence, but I imagine at the same time, for you as an actor, that it must have complicated some of the approach. Being conscious of it. Were there discussions about that? How to both honor Chris's performance, but also make it your own, so it wasn't just mimicry? Because I don't think it's mimicry. You're doing a very different thing, but you have those echoes. You have that connection in the performance.
Thank you. The mimics were only slightly in pushing up glasses in nods from how he composed himself, and it's just a twinkle in his, like it's a twinkle in his eye. The knowingness that he carried, the joy that he brought to the character that is in so much of the movie. I never felt bound by that. I really felt honored, and that I wanted to live up to and honor that all those qualities, not only because he's my Superman, but for all the people that he was their Superman. I wanted to be able to bring that to them as much as possible. I think what got in my way more than anything was being a young actor. That was my first feature film, and although I didn't feel a lot of pressure, outside pressure, I felt it on set. I felt it. No, I felt nervous and anxious. I was trying to get through that to relax. So there are moments in the movie where I'm a young, stiff actor, and the character's still coming through, but I don't realize that I can just say, "Hey, can I flip this sentence a little bit? Can we just like workshop like how I can make this come out of my mouth in an organic way?" Because I'm saying it the same way every time. I'm trapped. I'm stuck in this spot. And those are veteran things that I know now as an actor that I can speak to a director about, and the writers about, to help. And just, I thought the Clark Kent scenes were the first things we filmed. So that's me kind of like getting into it. So some of those moments to me feel awkward, and there are other couple moments to the movie where I'm like, oh, I wish I could have relaxed more. Like I had it, I was doing it, but I didn't know that I was doing it enough, But that just comes with age. But I don't think it was because I felt like I had to be Chris. It was like, how do I be Superman? How do I, if anything, it was chasing the manliness and composure of Superman at times that made me maybe sometimes a little bit too stoic or disconnected. Maybe those are things that I would change, but the essence is still there no matter what. So it's good.
My memory is terrible, but 2005, 2006, you pretty much dodged social media as well. So
yes,
that weight wasn't there like it is for a Cavill or
not as much. There were bulletin boards and message boards, and so there was a lot of like on Superhero Hype and some other ones that were around. Blue Tights was the positive one because they were was like Superman, but there were he's not big enough, and comments about the chest or how much weight I should put on or whatever that was. I thought it was interesting, and I certainly didn't ruin my life, but it was in my back of my head a little bit to make sure that I physically looked the way, because you have to also feel like it. You want to be fit and feel like it. Anyway. But largely I escaped it, thankfully, and paparazzi and all that stuff, because we were in Australia, so it was a safe, much safer place to kind of film it.
I think I'm not alone that plane sequence. I don't think it's just one of the best Superman sequences. I genuinely think it's one of the best action sequences shot and put on film. It's an incredibly well structured sequence, and I think the most beautiful moment for me isn't. The most beautiful moment of it is Lois, Kate Bosworth, looking out the window and seeing you shoot past, and this angel, and it's just, there's something really mystical about it. Did it feel? How conscious were you guys of that Christ-like presence?
Hey, my friends, we'll get back to my conversation with Brandon Routh in just a moment. This is the part of the episode where, out of a general interest in seeing this newsletter and podcast grow, I ask you to remember to subscribe to 5 a.m. Story Talk if you haven't already. Better yet, become a paid supporter if that's something your bank account can manage these days. At Substack, you'll get access to hundreds of exclusive articles and more than 50 hours of bonus podcast material, like today's bonus episode with Brandon. Most importantly, you'll help ensure that I can keep spending as much time on 5 a.m. Story Talk as I do, bringing you multiple features every week. You'll find all the relevant links you'll need in the episode notes. All right, let's get back to my conversation with Brandon now.
How conscious were you guys of that Christ-like presence? Because it's heavier than it is in the Donner, and I like it, but this time there are cruciform floating sequences and whatnot.
Yeah. Thank you. It's definitely in there. And there were conversations slightly about it, whether they were I don't know, they were really in pre-production, but on set, and, like understanding kind of the idea of where some of the stuff come from, even though it was not, certainly not touting any religiosity. It was showing the similarity between, in some ways. And I think it's apropos. I think that's part of the interesting aspect of Superman. That's certainly places that I went in my head and in my meditation and imagining about what it would be like to be the most powerful being on Earth. That's a place where I went. And what do you do? How do you help everyone? Can you help everyone? You can't help everyone, but are you the best or are you not the best? Like, what is if Superman saves everyone always, then he's just the savior. Superman is a lot about being a teacher as much as savior. And I think, anyway, that I appreciated those aspects of it. I think the powering up in the sun moment was one of my favorite moments. That's separate from the plane saving moment. But I think that in that moment, I knew that it was a special scene because it took months to do that green screen work for me and my stunt double and all the stunt team, and so much thought and with the score, it's an epic action sequence, and I think is one of the most exciting parts of it.
What was it like when you finally saw the film? What were you immediately head over heels about it? Were there any points of concern where you thought, I don't know if this is going to work for people the same way, it's working for me? What was it like?
Yeah. I thought that it was pretty amazing. I probably rose-colored glasses at the time because I'm the guy, but I think I was a little bit critical of myself, but at times, but really loved the totality of the movie, with the exception of, I think I was confused because they hadn't included the going back to Krypton scene, the 10 minutes or so of the movie that I think are on one of the DVD extended scenes that show Kal-El's journey back to Krypton, being duped by Lex Luthor, thinking that that Krypton still exists. He goes back, finds that it doesn't. Then when he comes back, you understand like why he's crash landed in the totality heaviness of like he went to see his homeland. It was all gone. It was all destroyed. It gives more context to it, and also shows me as earlier in the movie. Otherwise, it's a long setup before we get to Superman. And I guess my only concern was, will people be okay waiting so long to see Superman for the first time? But other than that, I didn't know what else to say about it because I was such a newbie. But I was pretty happy with what I saw.
I remember my experience. It was a positive one. I went with a couple of friends. One of them didn't like Super Kid, stuff like that. But what I don't remember is the sort of overwhelming reaction at the time. I know there was a sequel that was greenlit, but what was your sense of the general population's reaction to it? Did you feel good, or was everyone concerned that it didn't land like it needed to? Who
knows for sure what is filtered down to me in the story that I get. But I obviously had the premiere in LA and then was in New York. I think I was actually in New York opening day and went around to a couple theaters. And I remember reading reviews, and by and large, from all the big reviewers, like reviews were good, were positive.
Yeah.
And that was like, that felt good. And so I thought we were in a good trajectory. Everyone was worried about Pirates of the Caribbean. I don't think anybody understood how big Devil's Wears Prada was going to be necessarily. We didn't. Got trounced by that. And Pirates of the Caribbean 2. And, it didn't, the first week we felt good, but then the numbers came back, and I think I was maybe hearing that it wasn't performing as well as they wanted to after that time period. And at that point, I was like hoping that I got to a certain 400 million was what I was told would signal, the ability to make a sequel. So then I just was watching for weeks to see if it would globally get above $400 million, which I think 394 million anyway. And, that was kind of, I was a little bummed upset about that. I was like, oh man, I thought we had the thing. And, I didn't know what else to do except for blame Pirates of the Caribbean 2 and Devil Wears Prada for coming out the same couple ways.
But at the same time, I'm not mistaken that there was a sequel. A sequel was scheduled, script was commissioned. You were told you were going to be Superman again, right?
I was told that they had worked on a sequel, and there was thoughts and ideas about a sequel, and that was a possibility. But I was never confirmed a second film. I pushed as hard as I could to help make it happen. Yeah. In a lot of different ways over the years. But it was never, to me, it was never a like, oh, it's going to happen and then pulled away. It was just like, is it going to happen? It might, maybe still. Months later, years later, I don't know, maybe. And I was just like, I left in a lot of unknown for far too long. I think I probably, had I not been such an eternal optimist, I probably would have given up hope earlier. But I was like, it could still happen 4 years later.
But given what we've talked about so far, this idea that it feels like destiny to get this far and to play Superman, to be happy with the film and then be left in a limbo after that journey to success. I'm sure when you referenced making it, you were probably talking about being cast as Superman and being in a massive summer blockbuster. What's that like for you as a person? I imagine that did a number on you, spending 2 or 3 years wondering what the hell is going on.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It was a very challenging time. Definitely, not diagnosed, but after a little while, it was a little bit of depression and upset. And I think I wasn't then able to put the best effort out in meetings and auditions, because I kept thinking, this is what I'm meant to be doing, is this. Like not these other roles, not this bad guy role, not this whatever silly role. Like I'm this guy. Or this is what I do really well, this character. And it was, I went, and then after a time, I did some films, independent films. I did some funny stuff after that. Then I kind of had to go get a little bit more humility, for lack of a better term, and did some television roles that, I would normally have said yes to, which were all good and provided, ended up being part of the path. But I had to redouble my efforts. I kind of had to relearn how to audition, how to be better in the room to get something new, a new role. And so that provided a lot of learning experiences. And it was tough.
What's fascinating about Superman as a character, at least in pop culture or cinema, is he doesn't go away. And I can't imagine both coming off of Superman Returns, feeling like you had nailed it, that being happy with the film, having that not move forward, and then Hollywood being what Hollywood is, which is now it's time to reboot the character while it's barely, not much time has passed.
Yeah.
I'm sure that is itself also for every Superman. I'm sure Henry feels the same way. It feels cruel. a little like getting stabbed again.
Yeah, I don't know if it gets easier for each passing gentleman who's played the character you see how not replaceable, but that there can be another story without you. Maybe it gets easier. It certainly was very challenging for me to know that there was another film happening, and then I was like, I'm right here. Like I think I did. I think I acquitted myself well enough, but not everybody appreciated, or thought the same. Regardless of why the decision was made, I understand that they wanted to go with a whole new thing. So I don't even necessarily it's not really up to me to take, or I don't really have to take that personally in the end, because, Henry did his thing, and then they went on to somebody else again. So even as well as his performed, things can change. And I think still understanding that even though that happened, even though there was a new Superman, it didn't mean that what I did and the work that I did didn't matter. But I think it felt like, to me, I think I couldn't feel it. And I definitely felt like, I took it personally, for a time, and gradually healing and letting go of that, as I'm just explaining, like I understand the process. At the same time, the fans were feeling a similar thing, which is an interesting journey that I went on with them, because they would often come up in those years after and at conventions that I did and say, no, it's not popular to like your movie, but I like it. I fight with my friends that it's the best Superman movie. But everybody had to kind of like be cagey in their support of Superman Returns, because they thought the world didn't like it, but they did. So then which we'll get to, my eventual return, like they went on a journey with me of like upset that it wasn't getting respected, to know, we're back, and I'm valid. They're validated, and I was validated when I returned.
Well, and I'll ask about that in just a moment. But I'll say I wish there had been more. But I think what was at least satisfying for somebody who grew up on the Reeve films, I don't think about 3 and 4 at all.
Yeah.
I rewatch 1 and 2 with my kids, and in a weird way, you managed to wrap up that character so that my son can watch that trilogy and understand a sort of cycle. The son becomes the father becomes the son, and while there was more story to go, it does feel like something that never got to be properly wrapped up was wrapped up. So I appreciate that part of it immensely.
Yeah. I'm grateful for that too. I'm grateful to add to Chris's version and Richard Donner's version of the film, and that beautiful storyline of Superman, that representation of Superman, also, and to be a part of that family. That's history, that's legacy, that's tried and true Superman, and I got to be a part of that, which, everything else is built. Everything has been built off of it, but it's been, James's universe is more like the Donnerverse than Zack Snyder's. Yeah. But anyway, it's all, one builds upon the other, even if they take an alternate view of a worldview and an attack about Superman. It's all from a similar place. And anyway, I'm honored to have been a part of that and to have worked kind of in a way alongside Chris.
Well, as you just mentioned, you got to return to Superman. My friend Mark Guggenheim's the one who introduced us, but you got to return to him 13 years later during the Arrowverse Crisis on Infinite Earth crossover event. I think Tom, whom you mentioned, is a friend of yours, was hesitant about that. Was it an immediate yes for you? Was that easy?
Yes, it was basically it was an easy yes. Once I did want a moment to think about it, and I had a couple, prerequisites. It came at a challenging time because, so it was a gift and also just a strange thing about life to be handed like a negative and a positive at the same time. I just found out the week before that, in kind of unceremonious way, that I was going to be written off of Legends of Tomorrow along with Courtney halfway through season 5, and felt like kind of disrespected in that way, and the way that was handled and the reasoning of it. And then to have Mark call and say, I'm handling the crossover this year. Would you like to, would you consider playing a different character with a different colored suit? something like that. And I was like, what? Are you saying what I think you're saying? I was like, a blue suit? He's like, yeah. It's like, are you serious? And, it was a shocking, kind of beautiful moment. I was very grateful, and still am. I'm, a little bit emotional about it right now because it meant a great deal that DC and Warner Brothers and CW obviously had said yes to it because I felt abandoned, or like the kid the kid nobody wants to talk about because Superman Returns was, I don't know if it was on purpose or not, but it kind of got left and dirt shoveled on it. It felt like in the media and stuff, on which it wasn't, which for me was one thing, but also for fans. Again, it's like, there's a shared symbiosis of the movie getting turned down and not turned down, but spoken of ill and misrepresented, that all these people who did like it had to go, but I like it. And then they feel like they can't speak up because like, oh, well, I guess it's not cool to like that movie, but I liked it. And this for them was, aha, you are not silly for thinking that Superman was a decent Superman, or the Superman Returns was good. In fact, he's back. And we're continuing on the story a little bit. And so those people could come out of the limelight, or come out of the shadows into the limelight, I guess, and celebrate their version of Superman. And so now I don't hear as often, the asterisks about not as many people like the movie, but I do. People are more free to share that they like Superman Returns, and we get to share in the process of that kind of a healing process that wasn't just for me, Yeah. Anyway, I didn't know that context. I didn't know that at that moment when Mark called me on the phone. I was just very grateful, and it meant a lot to my personal journey that I was like seen, honestly, and respected in a way. So if I had to leave the Arrowverse, I'm glad that I got to do that on my way out.
Yeah, it sounds like amazing closure.
Yes, ultimate. To be Superman once, and to be Superman twice, maybe is more difficult because of the odds stacked against it. Even if you've proven yourself, so for it to happen, it was just incredible. And usually, once you have two, you get three, and then if three, you got four. But that's just like math of some sort, or some kind of basis of. Never mind, I'm getting off into other subjects.
Well, I only have a couple more questions left for this part of our conversation, but I'm curious. You've had 20 years to look back, and now it's the 20th anniversary. I just rewatched it, I watched it with my son for the first time, my eldest, a year and a half ago. So I've seen it a bit recently. I look back at it, and I think this has everything that people of the time asked for out of Superman. It has real stakes for Superman, huge epic sequences with really iconic moments, iconic shots that are easily frameable. It has so much going for it. So I look back and I don't understand why it did get negative blowback from any seriously vocal fan group. How do you look back at it with 20 years of perspective and the experience you've accumulated? Do you have any idea about what might not have worked?
Not enough action. Superman didn't punch anybody. They thought I was a creeper when I overhear go down and I listen to Lois and Jason's conversation at the house. Some people didn't like the kid. Those are kind of the biggest things that I hear. Not enough action, too weepy, dramatic of a story. And okay, sure. I understand some of those points. For me, the most important thing that comes from the movie, that has come from the movie, that I have heard countless times now, and sometimes probably I've heard from countless fans about the impact that the movies had, whether they were abroad serving in service to the country, or saw the movie with a family member who's now passed, or now married to the person they went to see the movie with, or that Superman has been an inspiration to them in their lives. That's an incredible thing that is the power of art and story to really help give the rest of humanity some kind of guide of how to be a good person in the world, whether you're Christ or whether you're Superman, whether you're just trying to be a good, upstanding citizen of humanity. We don't have a lot of those people that we can look to, certainly in real life. So a lot of times we have to create these fictional characters, and Superman is a pinnacle among them. And that's the most important thing in a holistic viewpoint that I sit as with Superman, as I view the world. I kind of always viewed the world that way, but it's only encouraged my excitement to look at the world in a bigger, more holistic way. And we need to have people and stories and ideals to look up to create a better future for humanity. And Superman has done really heavy lifting in pushing humanity to a better version of itself. We have to see what we don't have. We either have to imagine how we can be better people, or see somebody else being a better, a bigger, more evolved version of human to go toward. Because if we don't have those people on the leading edge, or there's characters on the leading edge, then we don't have anything to shoot for. So Superman Returns, I think, represents some of those best qualities about Superman.
Well
and
said.
Why we need Superman, not only to save us, but just as that image, that the word is escaping me, just that model of how best we can be.
I've heard quite a bit about this lately. The idea
Archetype,
of-
that's the word I was thinking of. Archetype. He's a great
Yes.
hero archetype.
Film used to provide a sort of moral roadmap, and many of these characters that we love do that. And a lot of cinema has drifted in the 21st century away from that. And that's how I've always seen Superman. He's religion neutral, moral God for us that allows everybody to see something
Perfect
good
teacher.
and beautiful.
Any and all comers.
Exactly. Like nobody gets excluded with Superman, which makes him a pretty powerful uniting character. Okay, so one more question, but first, you're about to come back for the bonus episode to break down a seminal piece of art from your life. Do you want to tease what we're going to be talking about?
Sure. Well, you asked me what was kind of a seminal work of cinema that I guess I took it that made an impact on me. And I didn't grow up with a lot of movies. We didn't have a VCR player. We had to rent it from the grocery store, or borrow the camcorder from the church, video camera from the church, to watch it in VCR mode. So we didn't own a lot of movies, and I didn't have cable for a long time. But my sister and I would go to the store in Norwalk, Iowa, and I don't know, at least 10 to 15 times, we would rent one of the two same movies. And it was either her favorite, which was Labyrinth, or mine, The Dark Crystal. Both Jim Henson productions. And Dark Crystal was always my choice, and is what I chose as my seminal, piece of work that it has influenced me, I think, in ways that I didn't really understand until revisiting.
Well, I look forward to digging into that with you. So for the final question, Superman Returns is about fathers and sons in a manner. It's about Superman finding out he has a son of his own, and you have one too, correct?
Yes.
So what does he think about having Superman as a dad, and does he have any opinions about Superman Returns?
He's warming to the idea of his dad being Superman. I think it's easier for him to see me as faulty characters and comedic characters. There's a movie that I did that maybe someday we'll see theaters or streaming service someday called Out of Order. It's a zany workplace comedy where I play two characters and kind of wear disguise to a degree. So I play two characters, a theme in my life. And he thinks it's the most funny movie I've ever done and maybe one of his top 5 movies, period. So it's easier for him to see me as that than Superman. We watched it within the last couple of years, and he liked it and appreciated and thinks it's cool that I'm Superman. But he's more excited about me being the Atom. Often, it's just a more relatable character, I think. Because dads make mistakes. I'm certainly not a perfect dad, and so he'll tell you about that any day. And so it's hard to see me as Superman sometimes.
Yeah. Thank you so much. This has been a genuine pleasure. I've talked about it with many friends, but to be able to talk about Superman Returns with that Superman has just been wonderful.
Well, thank you. I certainly appreciate the time and appreciate that we get to celebrate the movie and all the fans that love Superman Returns. And thank you all for watching and love to everyone.
As for the rest of you out there, I hope this conversation about acting and filmmaking, dreams, and Superman Return moved and delighted you as much as it did me. If you have any questions about it, drop them in the comments. Don't forget to hit subscribe too. But whatever you do, don't run just yet. There's a bonus episode with Brendan Routh available for you to listen to too. He returns to talk about a seminal piece of art from his life, the 1982 film, The Dark Crystal. We'll get into how the film reprogrammed Brandon's creative imagination and even understanding of good and evil, kicked off a lifelong love of fantasy, and helps explain the importance of Superman to him and the world today. The best way to listen to this bonus episode is at the 5 a.m. Story Talk newsletter at Substack or Apple, which you can find links to in the episode notes. That's it for now, Story Talkers. I'll see you soon.